Kenneth the K-Rock Klein coming to you with another episode of Krocking, Locking and Dropping with the K-Rock. This is episode 22, and I'm kind of stuck, if you will. I'm still at my parents' house as of this podcast, and obviously the reason being, of course, is Hurricane Beryl, or Tropical Storm Beryl, whatever it was when it made landfall, kind of made its way towards Houston, giving it a little nice shower. Maybe a little bit too much with all the flooding and stuff and causing some significant damage. Not exactly what it was with Hurricane Harvey or any previous hurricane, but still, anytime a hurricane comes, there is to be damage, there is to be closures on roads. And unfortunately, some of the rain and flooding has affected Beaumont, Texas, to where Lamar University had been closed for the past 2 days. So I'm still stuck in my parents' house, but I am going to make my way back to Beaumont eventually, so that way we can, get back to normalcy with me working and also giving out some podcasts. But fortunately, I'm still here and able to make some podcasts, so I'm doing okay. My parents' house, they didn't have any significant damage around as far as the house is concerned. There was a pecan tree, I will say, though, that was right next to my parents' house, and if it had blown in another direction, if the wind had blown it in another direction, we probably would have gotten hit. But it actually blew in a different direction, and it landed elsewhere. Unfortunately, it landed on a playground where the kids were were expected to play. Well, not me per se, but I'm sure my mom had visions of grandkids playing on the playground, and now she's wondering, what are we going to do with the playground, man? I mean, that's ridiculous. It's so sad. Yeah, so the playground, unfortunately, is out. But anyway, I am doing okay. Everything is all right here. I mean, we did have some, winds and some rain yesterday, but it's a nice, beautiful day. You wouldn't have known that there was a hurricane that actually hit the area. So just to give you my 2 cents update as far as what exactly happened around here, but I'm doing all right. And so I'm going to be doing a little bit of a podcast right now. I'm going to be talking a little about something that I did see on the internet with regards to Hurricane Beryl. But I'm also going to be talking about the United States men's national basketball team as they get set to make their way to Paris for the upcoming 2024 Olympic Games. They had a scrimmage, and it was a pretty good scrimmage, but there are some concerns that I do feel for this upcoming United States men's basketball team and whether or not they are very capable of winning the gold medal. So that should be a main concern for people to look out for. And so we're going to be talking about that just as soon as we get done talking about the very first segment that I want to discuss regarding Hurricane Beryl. And it is regarding a picture that I saw of one NFL stadium in particular. So stay tuned, folks. We're going to step aside for a moment, get our batteries, and we will be right back to have our next episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock, which, of course, you can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, and also I will be uploading this podcast to my YouTube channel at KWCLINE91, so you can watch that on YouTube as well. So stay tuned, folks. We will be right back. Now, before we get started with talking about the first segment I want to talk about, I decided to do something really cool. I decided to show you some pictures from the tree that that fell down at my parents' house yesterday during the storm. And if you're on my YouTube channel, you will be able to see it from on this screen. So I'm going to post it for the first time. So I'm taking a step aside from the beautiful, gorgeous-looking picture of the crocodile that you normally would see on this logo. And I'm going to show you some pictures from the storm. First picture I want to show you is the branch or the tree leaves from the tree that fell down. As you can kind of tell, it's like a massive, branch or bushes, like you're almost walking into a jungle or getting ready to walk into a jungle. And yeah, it's kind of a creepy because you obviously had no idea that there was one big tree that fell down right behind. You would normally think it would be just some series of bushes. So that's one cool picture when you first get an entrance. Second picture I want to show you. As you can see, the tree is down, and you can also see the slide of the playground. Yeah, there's definitely part of a big branch that is right there blocking it on the playground as well. So definitely a huge, just a huge tree that you're about to see with this branch. And it's definitely kind of crazy how the wind blew it more towards the direction of this playground, more so than to our house. And we're very fortunate. I don't know if you could say it was God who said, go to the playground instead of the house, or if it was fate. Whatever you believe, the winds were definitely in our favor, but sadly not for the playground as well. Third picture. Look at the size of the roots. I mean, it was a big tree. Just look at it. The thing was so huge. It took strong hurricane-like winds to blow this thing down. And man, I'll tell you what, it is really a big tree when you look at it, just for how big it is and how old it is. I mean, it has definitely been there for a long time, and finally it just got to a point where it can no longer be there. So we're definitely going to have a hard time, breaking it up, cutting it up as we speak. And it's going to be interesting to see what we decide to do with this tree as well. And then the fourth picture, obviously, this was from my Instagram account, which you can also follow on my Instagram at Crock, Lock, and Drop It. Yeah, so K-Rock, Lock, and Drop It. That's the reason why I came up with the name of this podcast. But as you can see, all the branches on top of the patio of the playground, and yeah, there's definitely no one going to be getting on the playground real soon. So I did say RIP playground because I don't know if the playground's going to be around for a while. I mean, maybe I could be wrong, but my parents will have to figure that out. I wish I could help out, but unfortunately I have to get back to Beaumont soon to go back to work. But yeah, just showing you some interesting pictures from the damage around my house at this point. And now I want to show you something that I saw on the internet. Now, you remember back in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina, there was a picture of the New Orleans Saints Superdome, the Louisiana Superdome, that had structural damage to its roof. As you can see in this picture right here, this was from after Hurricane Katrina, where those strong winds blew off part of the roof and it left it so exposed and so bare, you would never think that the Saints would be able to play a football game in that circumstances, but they ultimately did. So, yeah, this was really interesting to be reminded of the Saints. And the reason why I say this is because Patrick Storm, who is a local Houston reporter, just someone that covers Houston sports, he had a tweet on there that said that NFL scriptwriters are about to recreate history. And what he was describing was, the fact that after Hurricane Beryl, there was a hole on the NRG Stadium, home of the Houston Texans, and I'm putting that picture up right now. So you can barely see it on this picture, but there was a hole right there on top of the stadium. And it's kind of amazing how you have all these winds that can blow things off, at the top of the roof in hurricane-like winds. You might normally associate them with tornadoes and such, but the fact that this was a hurricane that blew off at least part of it and caused a hole in the roof, it's remarkable. Now, I think back to the Minneapolis, the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome in Minnesota, and when the snow that built on top of the stadium finally gave way and it collapsed inside, leaving a snow mark. I can sometimes think about that. But man, just seeing this, NRG Stadium with a hole in its roof, that's just, it's really sad and unfortunate. Now, going back to Patrick Storm here, he said NFL scriptwriters are about to recreate history. And the reason why he said that is because if you remember after Hurricane Katrina, the New Orleans Saints reached the NFC Championship game that season. They lost to the Bears. But then 3 years later, they ended up winning a Super Bowl, their first and only Super Bowl title to this date, down in Miami, beating the Indianapolis Colts with Peyton Manning 31-17. And there's a picture right next to that Super Bowl, the Superdome, of Drew Brees, Sean Payton, and Jim Nantz, who was ready to interview the two, and then another Saints player. I can't tell who that is. If you know who it is by this video, please let me know in the comments. But yeah, so he's saying that it's a sense of deja vu, because in his mind, or at least in his joking mind, because I sometimes think this is a joke, the Texans are going to have themselves a tremendous season. They're going to get to the AFC Championship game, and they're going to get to the Super Bowl, and at least hopefully win it. And I'm thinking to myself, that would be nice. That would be ideal. So much so that I also replied to his comment, and putting it up right now on my Twitter, YouTube page. But I said, knock on wood, hoping for all 3 titles this year or soon from the Texans, Rockets, and Astros. And it's possible that we could have a Super Bowl champion in the Texans, and it's possible that the Stros can make another run for a World Series or so, which would really be nice, so we can shut up all those haters who are wasting their time and breath arguing over nothing, talking to clouds for that matter. But that's a story for another podcast eventually. But it's nice to think about that. But as I said in my last episode, I get a little weary. I get a little bit suspicious, because it's easy for people to associate natural disasters or tragic events with significant moments that could happen for a team later on in success. I talked about 9/11 and how the New York Yankees made it all the way to the World Series and came 1 win away from winning their 4th straight championship, but were unsuccessful. I talked about the Boston Marathon bombings with the Red Sox and the Bruins, and how the Bruins reached the Stanley Cup Finals and lost, but the Red Sox made the World Series and won. I talked about Hurricane Harvey with the Stros winning the World Series, and they would have won it regardless. And yeah, you have these tragic events that happen, and then later on, it coincides with the sports teams having great success in the future. But the more I think about it, I wonder what happened with some other, teams around the country in other tragic events. 1995, we had the Oklahoma City bombing, and the University of Oklahoma's football team, they went 5-5-1 that season, which in the Big 8 conference, that was 5th. So they didn't really do much as far as have a successful season. That was the first year coached by Howard Schnellenberger. I didn't realize he was the head coach of Oklahoma. I knew he coached Miami previously before and led them to a national championship, but I didn't think he coached the University of Oklahoma. And then speaking of Oklahoma State, just to be sure, they had a season where they finished 4-8 and were 2-5 in the Big 8 conference. So they didn't really do much as far as success there. Now, the Columbine school shooting in 1999, there have been school shootings before, and unfortunately there's been a number of them that have increased over the years, but that was really one of the first marquee moments in the United States history with the whole incident that happened in Columbine. But what gets lost under the radar is that their football team ended up winning the high school state championship in football. So a bit of joy and reprieve, especially after the Columbine school shooting. And then Virginia Tech in 2007, they had themselves a tremendous season after their school had a school shooting. They ended up going 11-3 and actually reached the, I want to say it was the Orange Bowl. They reached the Orange Bowl. They won the ACC championship, beating Boston College, and then they lost the Orange Bowl, losing to Kansas. Wait, Kansas? Kansas, the football team, beat Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl? Kansas was a very good team in 2007. In fact, college football was so weird I mean, obviously it started emotionally with Virginia Tech, but then you throw in Appalachian State with an upset. You throw in all these number one ranked teams that got lost. And, you have Kansas who had themselves a tremendous season. But then obviously LSU ended up winning the whole thing that year, which kind of brought college football back to normalcy in a sense. But yeah, so Virginia Tech ended up losing to Kansas in a close game at the Orange Bowl. So you think about that. And then one tragedy that I think needs to be talked about was an incident at the hotel, at the Marriott Hotel in 1981 in Kansas City. And that year, what happened was the Marriott Hotel had these walkways, one that unfortunately was lifting up another, and that walkway had built up so much strain from holding on to so many people that during an event where it was like a tea dancing event or so, or some kind of dancing event at the hotel, it collapsed, and unfortunately there were a number of people that lost their lives in that event. It's a real tragedy. But I thought about this, and I was thinking, how did the sports teams of Kansas City do? Well, Kansas City Chiefs, they went 9-7 and unfortunately missed the playoffs, while the Kansas City Royals, who were fresh off a World Series appearance in 1980, actually that was a very difficult year for Kansas City. They still made the playoffs, but they ended up getting swept by Oakland. But that was a weird year in 1981 because you had like a minor league baseball system where you had a first half winner for the division and a second half winner for the division. And you had your very first ever American League Division Series. But the reason for that was because there was a strike midway through the season that kind of made the schedule a little bit funky, if you will. So basically, all this to say, even if there is a tragic event, and it is a tragedy, sports can heal, but sometimes we find ourselves very greedy in thinking that, oh, we had this natural disaster, we had this tragedy happen to our city, and it's really sad, and it's sad and tragic, and we feel really terrible, and we do because we love our city. But guess what? We have a sports team that's going to be successful, and it's going to bring us hope and joy, and we're going to win a championship. No. It doesn't always work like that. You might have a great run or a great season as long as the breaks go your way and you have to continue to play. But it doesn't always work like that. And I sometimes have to remind myself about that, because even though this hurricane did hit the city, and yes, there is a hole at NRG Stadium, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Texans are going to win a Super Bowl, or the Stros are going to win a World Series, or the Rockets will win an NBA championship. Now, I do, sometimes think it would be cool if all three teams were to win in the same year, just to really make a statement and really make us very excited. But it seems likely that it's not going to be the case for this year. I'm not saying that it's not possible that we'll win two, because I think we can win two, but it's going to take a lot for that to happen. I do think Houston's going to get a championship in the near future. In fact, if you listen to my other podcast, Two Pals on a Pod, I made a guarantee. I said that Houston teams were going to win a championship this decade. So far, the Stros won in 2022. Now we just need to wait for the Texans and the Rockets to win championships for this decade. But my point being that it is tragic that this happened, and certainly, only two people passed away, which, it's sad, but it's, nice to know that it wasn't worse. But, you just can't use this. You can't use a natural disaster as a way to springboard yourself to, thinking, hey, we're going to win a championship. Players, I know, will motivate themselves to play for their city, but, it doesn't always mean it's going to be anything. Did the Kansas City Chiefs have anything that happened before they won their third Super Bowl? Sadly, they had something that happened during their Super Bowl parade, which, I don't know if they'll use that as motivation. Maybe they'll probably use it as motivation to try to win their third straight Super Bowl. What about Denver? What about any of the teams, or the Broncos, or the Colorado Avalanche. Did any of them have any tragic events that led to anything? Well, no. But, they weren't as successful in the years that stuff happened to them. They won championships in years where nothing really happened to the city of Denver or the entire state of Colorado. So, it's a little bit of a touchy subject, and I'm trying to remind myself not to get too hopeful or too greedy, because ultimately you still got to go out there and you still got to play. And I do think more championships are coming for Houston, but I don't want to get too caught up with the idea that, hey, we just had this hurricane, it's going to happen. So, to Patrick Storm, I like what you're trying to do, and I'm sure you meant that in a joking way, and I know that there's a lot of people commenting on this. This one's really funny. This is from Wandering Yankee. The team is almost going to move to Oklahoma. Well, remember when the Saints had to play their games in Baton Rouge and San Antonio? They almost ended up going to San Antonio because it seemed like that was likely to happen because nobody thought the Saints were going to return to the Superdome. And San Antonio came real close to having an NFL team. But, so, basically, it's nice to think about it, but I wouldn't expect it to happen unless both teams end up going on a run at this point. So, that's just my thoughts on the whole Beryl situation with the sports. And next, we are going to be talking about the U.S. men's national team. Are they going to be like legitimate gold medal winners, or is there going to be some competition that are going to try to stop them? And could they actually win at something other than gold? We'll find out. My thoughts when we come back. We are getting closer and closer and closer to the start of the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris, France. And FYI, a little bit of a sidetrack here. 2 days, today is July 9th on this podcast, but on July 11th, 100 years ago, Eric Liddell, a British runner from Scotland, originally born in China, who was a missionary, had refused to partake in the 100 meters heats because they took place on a Sunday. And he believes that the Sabbath belongs to the Lord, which is a common Christian belief. I mean, I believe that myself, but I certainly wouldn't mind competing on a Sunday as long as I'm able to get my time to worship him and, give a little prayer out to him as well. But he actually got to partake in the 400-meter event, and this was not his strongest event, and yet he somehow managed to win the 400 meters by breaking the world record at the time. And that, of course, was played into the movie Chariots of Fire, which I got to see. And I've seen the movie Chariots of Fire a number of times before, but I felt like because it was the 100th anniversary of the Olympic Games in Paris, I figured, you know what, we might as well watch it. So Mom and I got to watch it, and it was a great movie to watch, especially that scene when Eric Liddell is coming down the stretch to win that race. If you haven't seen the movie, I apologize. I spoiled it for you. But at the end of the day, just go watch it. It's a real joy to watch as well. But anyway, the reason why I bring up the Paris Olympic Games is because we're starting to get ready to have the Paris Olympic Games as well. And one of the sports that I'm sure most of us will be watching is basketball. Men's basketball USA. And I'm curious to see how our Olympic men's basketball team is going to do. But I am a little bit concerned because looking at the roster here of this men's basketball team, you have at least, I want to say 12 players. Yes, 12 players. So the 12 players that they selected are Bam Adebayo from the Miami Heat, Devin Booker from the Phoenix Suns, Stephen Curry from the Golden State Warriors, Anthony Davis from the Los Angeles Lakers, Kevin Durant, currently on the Phoenix Suns, Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Joel Embiid of the Philadelphia 76ers, Tyrese Halliburton of the Indiana Pacers, Drew Holiday of the Boston Celtics, LeBron James, who plays for this team called the Lakers, but that's a different story, and then Kawhi Leonard from the Los Angeles Clippers, and Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics. So, That is the roster that is going to be competing for the United States, looking to win another gold medal in men's basketball. But there was a scrimmage that they partook in a couple of days ago, or if you've seen this podcast. They partook in a scrimmage against the U.S. men's basketball select team. Now, these are guys that are young NBA players. They're either rookies or sophomores. And, they're just trying to prepare their training with the United States men's national team. And these are players that are current NBA or G League players, as well as one college player in Cooper Flagg out of Duke University. But some of the other names listed on the U.S. men's basketball select team: Jalen Duren from the Detroit Pistons, Langston Galloway, who's currently a free agent, Nigel Hayes-Davis, who plays in Turkey, Tracy Jackson-Davis of the Golden State Warriors, Jaime Jaquez of the Miami Heat, Brandon Miller of the Charlotte Hornets, Trey Murphy of the New Orleans Pelicans, Keegan Murray of the Sacramento Kings, Brandon Podziemski of the Golden State Warriors, Micah Parter of the Utah Jazz or the Salt Lake City Stars, which is the G League team, Peyton Pritchard of the Boston Celtics, Jabari Smith of my Houston Rockets, Jalen Suggs of the Orlando Magic, and Amin Thompson of my Houston Rockets. So I got a couple of Rockets players that are competing on the U.S. National Select Team. They had a scrimmage the other day, and very competitive game. We got to see the best of both teams play out against each other. Cooper Flagg, who despite being in college, actually was really impressive in a game, and certainly an opportunity for him to step into the ring against the NBA's best just to see how good he can be in the future. And he's somebody that could really be a potential to be a star in the NBA when he gets drafted. And certainly, some key highlights: Jabari Smith putting down the poster on Joel Embiid. That was really nice. LeBron James and Steph Curry connecting really well for some key baskets as well. Came down to the wire, but ultimately the men's national team ended up winning by the final score of 74-73. Now, as much as it's really nice to see all the highlights of that game, I tend to think that maybe it's probably not a good idea to have these scrimmages at least posted publicly. Because what we saw, it makes you wonder, are the current men's basketball roster, are the current guys on the team better than the previous squads before? I think they're better than some other teams, but there was actually an article that was posted, and the question was, is the 2024 U.S. men's basketball team better than the Dream Team? And I struggle with this one because from an athletic perspective, without question, there was more talent on the team. The current roster is better athletically and better, from a social media perspective. They're better athletically, in my opinion, but I don't think collectively they can somehow win the game. And I think the United States has this perceived arrogance that, we could just throw anybody that's very talented and skillful and we can come out and win gold medal. Well, why do you think you have guys like LeBron James and Steph Curry on the roster, or Kevin Durant or Joel Embiid? Why are those guys on there? Well, what happened in the World Championships? The guys didn't even medal. They finished in fourth place for all I know. And yet, I think it's kind of crazy how we get this perceived arrogance that the men's basketball team can throw anybody on the court and come out winning the gold medal. But that's the problem with this team. They're still talented, but I feel like they're getting to the point where we're starting to see them in the decline of their careers. Now, I'm not saying Jason Tatum is in his decline. He's still in his prime. Tatum's in his prime. I see Tyrese Halliburton about to be in his prime. Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, those guys are in their prime. But looking at some of the other guys, LeBron James, he's getting up there in age. He's over 40. Steph Curry, he could still shoot the rock, but the Warriors haven't been as successful. And unfortunately, with Klay Thompson going to the Dallas Mavericks now, it's going to be interesting to see how he can manage without his splash brother Joel Embiid, yeah, he's won MVP or so, but he hasn't been able to develop, or he's been injured and hasn't been able to step up. And then Anthony Davis, I think his career is being wasted as a Laker right now. I think the Lakers are definitely wasting his career because Davis was brought in to be the number 2 option for LeBron James. There have been times where he stepped up and has been the best player for the Lakers when LeBron hasn't been 100%. And yet, I just think, they're wasting his career. And I just have a hard time seeing how he can be an incredible superstar, talented player. But the thing is, I feel like this United States roster is a little older in age. Now, when the 92 Dream Team happened, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were the captains. They were the old guys. But you had Michael Jordan in his prime. You had Clyde Drexler in his prime. Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, Charles Barkley, Scottie Pippen. All those guys were in their primes. Even John Stockton was kind of getting to that stage. This was a Dream Team squad that destroyed all its opponents. And while there were some teams that really didn't deserve to be on the floor with them, there were others that played tremendously well against him. Lithuania had a great game against him, but they still lost by like double digits. Croatia was probably the toughest competition that the Dream Team faced. That was the team that had Drazen Petrovic, Toni Kukoc, Dino Radja, just to name a few. All 3 of those guys are Hall of Fame players, and Croatia actually played them really tough in both those games, but still, you wouldn't know that because the Americans just flat out dominated. So, the thing is that this United States men's basketball team currently is a talented team. But here's the problem. You can't say that they're the best team because right now the rest of the world has caught up. Just looking at the group stages for this tournament, like the United States, they're paired up with Puerto Rico, South Sudan. Okay, 2 teams that easily the Americans should beat. But Serbia, Nikola Jokic's squad, that should be a bit of a tough challenge. Now, obviously, one player doesn't win you the game, but when you have a guy like Nikola Jokic leading the way, he's going to be a massive threat for Team USA. And that's why he has won. He's a 3-time MVP for that matter. I don't know if he should have won it this year, but, he's a 3-time MVP regardless. And he's still one of the best players. But then you go to Group B. You have France, who, by the way, Victor Wembanyama, the Rookie of the Year, is the lead source for that squad. Germany, Japan, Brazil, not quite. I think France should get out of that group easily, considering that this is their home country. And then Giannis with Greece, Spain still a big factor, and Canada, Australia. The competition's getting better. Now, I think the United States will have some tough games, but I don't think it's going to be enough to deny them the gold medal because of the guys they have on the court. But I think the biggest problem is we get so heavily invested with this idea that the Americans are, this American team was better than the Dream Team. Now, I do think from an athletic perspective they are talented and better, but I don't think they would have. I just struggle with the notion that they could easily win a game against the Dream Team. Now, I think it would be very close. If you put them together, I think it would be a very close and exciting game, but I just think the Dream Team just had a little bit too much. But it's hard to say because the problem is this American team is going to be tested, whereas the previous American team, the 92 squad, they had literally no competition. Croatia was a very tough match, but they still won by double digits. Same thing with Lithuania, who ended up winning the bronze that year, but they still won by double digits. I think this American team is going to have some massive challenges. And certainly, this will be a big statement if the Americans win, because clearly these guys suited up for Team USA. I just think it's hard to say that this will be the best American team because they're old. Some of the guys are in their prime or in the peak of their careers, whereas others are in their primes. Now, if you had a prime LeBron, if you had a prime Steph Curry, a prime KD, and a prime Joel Embiid, those guys, without question, this competition would be over. It would be blown out of the water. But the problem is, there's guys that are at the peak. And after what we saw in the scrimmage, I think the United States might be in some trouble. I don't think they're going to lose the gold medal. I don't think, they're going to lose it. I just think that it won't be as easy as many people believe. Like, a lot of people are saying, well, the 2008 team, Redeem team, was better, or the 2012 team was better. You want to know why that's the case? You want to know who else was on those teams? Why the United States won the gold medals? Sorry, LeBron, you weren't as much of a factor. I mean, you were contributive, but you didn't help out as much. It was Kobe freaking Bryant who was the difference for that Team USA. He was the reason the Americans won the gold medals in those 2 years. So, you tell me. I mean, this is not an easy deal that the Americans are going to have. They're going to have some tough challenges. The rest of the world has caught up. And maybe it's just me being an old school guy, because I grew up in the 90s and, I've seen highlights of the Dream Team and they were dominant in their games as well. Maybe it's just the fact that basketball has definitely changed to where we're seeing more athleticism. But this is going to be a very stiff challenge. I think the greatest team should be a team that not only wins, but destroys their opponents. And I could see the United States beating Puerto Rico hands down. I could see them beating South Sudan hands down. But Serbia will definitely be a tough game. Now, I'm not saying the Americans won't lose. I think it's going to be a test. I think the Americans will come out on top. But then you look at teams like France, teams like Spain or Greece, with the players that they have. It's going to be a very difficult challenge for the Americans. I think most people are underestimating the other countries in this tournament. But, again, it would be very disappointing if the Americans were to finish with a silver medal. Because this is where the pressure comes into view. You have all these superstar talent. You have guys that have played on Olympic teams before. You had guys that are superstars, guys that won championships, MVPs, and all that. You put them together in this team because you were embarrassed by the way that the last American team, finished in a world championship. And if you don't win the gold medal, that's on you. It would be the biggest disappointment in the history of the Olympic Games for the United States since 2004, when they had all those incredible talented players, the Tim Duncans, the Allen Iversons, the Antonio McDyess. That was clearly not a team that deserved to be playing together. It was a team that should have won a gold medal, but they were just a certain arrogance about them. And by that point, massive disappointment in that stage. But, what can you do? I mean, the Americans are going to have to overcome that together. They're going to have to work to, win the gold medal as a team. And it's just a matter of putting their egos aside. It's going to be real interesting to see how they're able to, figure that out, like how to win the games. So, I mean, it is what it is. The team is put together, and I just think sometimes you might be wondering, should we actually put the select team in, because they made it a very closer game? Or was it possible that there was not as much effort on the United States? Because you got to remember, in 1992, the Dream Team, Chuck Daly, the head coach of that squad, actually threw the game on purpose to U.S. men's select team. He threw the game on purpose. And that team, the men's team, lost to college stars on purpose. And that was because of Chuck Daly. He threw the game on purpose just to teach him a lesson that you could lose if you don't do, the things that you have to do to win. And that was a lesson for, the men's basketball team. Now, I mean, I don't know if it was a case where the game was thrown, but it is a little bit suspicious when you see a close game like that, especially with how much the level of college players or young players that are coming in have kind of closed the gap on these old grizzled veterans. Now, certainly, if it was a case where you had prime guys on the squad, everybody in the United States was on their prime, this game wouldn't even be close. But clearly the United States will be favored to win the gold medal again. And there's definitely going to be a lot more pressure. Like, there was pressure on the United States team to win the gold medal after they had a loss in 2021 back in Tokyo, but A loss here would certainly put a lot more pressure. And this is a team that has a lot of pressure on them because you signed up, you're spending your summer away from your family to focus on a goal to win a gold medal to bring pride back to USA basketball following a disappointing loss. And if you don't succeed, it's all on you. It's going to hurt the legacy of LeBron James even more, especially given all that is happening with that Lakers organization. It's going to hurt Steph Curry because he's not going to have to play without his splash brother in Golden State. And it's going to hurt Kawhi Leonard because Kawhi Leonard has obviously not lived up to his expectations after leading San Antonio and Toronto to NBA championships. Joel Embiid's going to get hurt. Anthony Davis is going to get hurt with his legacy. Now, Anthony Edwards, he had a great post-NBA playoffs, but he didn't have a particularly great series against Dallas. And then Tyrese Halliburton couldn't help get the Pacers to an NBA Finals over the Boston Celtics. But, every one of those guys are going to have to deal with some pressure because it's going to be real tough. I think Jason Tatum might be the only one that might not feel as much, or Drew Holiday, because they're the only guys for the Boston Celtics that are on the team. But if they do lose or they finish with the silver medal, it's going to be like, well, yeah, you guys won a championship, but you also kind of were a bit of a disappointment as well. So every one of those guys are going to feel some pressure from the media, from the fans, from everyone that has put their heart and soul into making sure that the Americans win the gold medal for this year. But there's definitely going to be some stiff competition from other countries because clearly, the race to be the best is a lot closer than most people think. So that's the way I look at it as well. But again, I think the Americans will win the gold medal. As far as silver and bronze, I think France might actually be good enough to win the bronze, even though they might have some stiff competition in their group from Germany and Japan. Well, maybe not Japan, but also Brazil. I mean, I think France is Germany is the only competition for France, but I think Greece will be a big factor. So we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But I'm really excited to see, another gold medal for the USA, hopefully, and also for all the other Olympic Games that are going on as of this moment. So that's going to conclude my thoughts on Team USA's situation. And stay tuned, folks. We are going to step aside real fast to give my final thoughts on this podcast. Well, another podcast out of the way, episode 22, a bit of an emotional one, but I do hope that if you are listening and you were hit by Hurricane Beryl or going through the recovery process and trying to rebuild, and as the floodwaters start to recede and everything, I do hope that you're okay and you're able to get yourself power back, because I know that last time I checked, there was like over 1.5 million people that were without power down in the Houston area. So it's always tough, especially when you see your city in floodwaters. And, again, not as significantly bad as what Harvey did, but again, Harvey was more of a rain event, and this was just a Category 1 that kept just passed on through. And so hopefully everyone is able to get themselves back in session and recover. And next time that I do a podcast, we're all kind of back to normalcy for that matter. I should be able to be back in Beaumont real soon. Just waiting for confirmation to let me know, hey, coming to work. I think it's going to happen tomorrow, but you never know. We'll just have to wait and see on that. So, again, thanks very much for listening to this podcast. Remember, you can tune in, subscribe to my podcast on Spotify and also on Podbean, and also listen to it on my YouTube channel, KWC LINE 91. And so, and also still talking to my colleague Mark T. Robinson on our other podcast, Two Pals on a Pod. We're hoping to get that up real soon. We should have an episode within the next future. But until then, this is Kenneth the K-Rock Klein saying goodbye, so long, stay safe, and I will see you guys next time on another episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping.